I don't know if you would be able to develop a blood pressure listening to that kind of music and dancing to it, because we understand that exercising is one of the ways in which you deal with that one. We'll hear more about that. So if you don't know how to dance, at least you'll be able to drink it.
If you don't know how to dance, you can move.
We'll hope that Benito will come and do that himself. Well, at this time we have with us someone to talk to us about that which is called the silent killer. Hypertension is usually acknowledged as a preventable and modifiable risk factor for cardiovascular
Preventable?
disease. It is preventable,
okay. Anyway,
according to the
doctor is
we'll
here.
find out. Okay. And it's been duly acknowledged as a global and public health crisis by World Health Organization. The Nigerian Heart Foundation says Nigerian youths are at risk of hypertension. Young people, especially those in the age bracket of 18 and 23.
What? Based
on their addictive consumption level. I don't know what that means, but of course we'll hear more.
Consumption
Of great concern is a quote to that, is the fact that more than half of the individuals with hypertension are unaware. These are shocking things here. In many low and middle income countries, less than 40% are unaware. In some of these countries, awareness levels are even less than 30%. Globally, more than 1 billion people are known to have hypertension, and the figure is estimated to increase to 1.5 billion by 2025. There's even a statistics that said about of the number of people that are aware, only about 23% of them are taking any medications or even doing anything to manage it whatsoever. Please let's have this conversation with Dr. Wale Kushimo, who is a cardiologist. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
We are afraid and you are smiling.
Should I start crying?
First of all, let's talk to that, the youth bracket that, you know, is in that statistic.
Surprising stat.
And shocking.
Yes, it is a serious problem, actually. Perhaps the single most important risk factor we have in our environment, you know, responsible for cardiovascular death. And this youth statistic, we are seeing it. I think if you speak to most cardiologists, they will tell you that, yes, we are seeing an increasing number of, you know, young people, you know, developing, you know, hypertension. And even the type that we commonly associate with the older population, that is what we call essential hypertension, one that is not due to a specific organ problem, you know. But one thing to note is that oftentimes these young people, one of the things that we observe is that they tend to have a family history. A lot of them have a family history. So it's said that if you have one of your parents, or especially both parents, having hypertension, your risk of developing hypertension is also there, and you tend to, it can occur at an earlier than expected. Usually most people feel they should become hypertensive when they're in their 40s, 50s, but it could be 25. I've seen some even as early as 18, 19, and a lot of times they tend to have both parents being hypertensive. So when you have strong genes, it increases your risk of having hypertension, and it can occur earlier. But of course, as we often say...
An 18-year-old has hypertension, meaning that for the rest of his life, he's going to be on medication?
Potentially, yes. Potentially, yes. So one thing is that, of course, hypertension is it's multifactorial. It's not purely genetic.
Sorry, Sam, sorry. It's not fair. He didn't ask for it. So perhaps you want to speak to how people get it. One is genetic, just as you have said now. Is there any way that that kind of person could have... Well, anyway, we'll talk to deal with it. So what are the other ways in which people, you know, get hypertension?
Okay, so hypertension is the origin of hypertension. That is the type that most people have. Is multifactorial. So it's an interplay of your genes, your lifestyle, and your environment. So so the fact that, of course, you have your parents being hypertensive does not mean you are definitely going to be hypertensive. No. So it's an interplay, it's an interaction between your genes, your genetic predisposition, and your lifestyle, your environment, and all that. So which means that potentially, even if you have the genes, if you live a healthy lifestyle, you could potentially prevent or delay the onset. So rather than developing it when you're 25, it become much later because of your healthy lifestyle. You could actually, delay the onset. And sometimes, in cases, it might potentially prevent, or if your hypertension is mild, that is maybe the blood pressure is not too high, the healthy lifestyle may even prevent you from using drugs. Because
what does a cardiologist consider to be a healthy lifestyle?
So a healthy lifestyle is, we consider that as somebody who is physically active, who eats a healthy diet, physically active, and also has an ideal body weight. Those, and then obviously also avoids, things that could, lifestyle habits that could potentially be harmful, like smoking, reducing moderate alcohol or no alcohol consumption. So these are basically, you could say, the main tripods that we consider.
I'm active. I don't take alcohol, but I'm hypertensive.
Yes. So obviously that can occur. That is why we say it's an interplay of genes and lifestyle. But then the good thing is that we still advocate this lifestyle for everybody, because these lifestyle measures have an effect at reducing blood pressure, so that even though you're hypertensive and you're having a healthy lifestyle, it could help your drugs to work better, or you may even potentially reduce the number of tablets you need to take. So for instance, just combining all those lifestyle habits might actually maybe reduce your tablets by 1 or 2, and that will help your adherence and will help you to actually take your tablets longer the fewer you take. And also it helps to facilitates control of your blood pressure. So it's something that we advocate for everybody, both for potentially prevention, for delay of onset, and for control of the blood pressure when you're hypertensive. Healthy lifestyle is recommended for all people.
You spoke to 3 factors that we'll have to sit down at a conference and agree. Genetic factors, lifestyle, and the environment. Genetic factors, you don't have control over it. The environment, maybe not, depending on your pocket, how deep or how shallow it is. Then there is lifestyle, also potentially something you can control, but then depends on your pocket. So how that would seem to put a certain class of people in an extremely vulnerable state.
Yes. So the thing is that we can all, within our means, I think everyone can live a healthier lifestyle. It's true that, okay, maybe when you talk about means and pocket, maybe you think some healthy food tends to be more expensive. Perhaps you're looking at, but food is not the only company. How about activity? Everybody can be physically active. You could have somebody, yes, maybe he's a person of poor means, but he spends most of his time just sitting down. Maybe she's a petty trader who has limited means, but spends the whole day sitting down. That's a sedentary lifestyle. That's a risk factor. So everyone, we can all, so living a healthy lifestyle, we can all live a healthier lifestyle. Definitely. Exercise is not limited. It doesn't really, we can all have inventive ways of being physically active. That trader there who maybe of little means, but she doesn't have to spend the whole day sitting down. She can take breaks. She could, on her way home, instead of using Okada to go everywhere, trek and have, so these are things that we can all do. So I think it's something that's irrespective of your pockets. I think it has to do with a lot of education. Many people don't know these things, and then we need to do a lot of education, a lot of community outreach and educating the populace on the benefits of having a healthy lifestyle.
Okay, you said something the other time that I caught, and perhaps by way of education, people need to also understand that. You said the kind of hypertension that many people have, that presupposes that there are different kinds.
Yeah.
Want to take us through that?
Yeah. So, as I said, first of all, hypertension is somebody that has a persistent elevation of blood pressure. So everybody has a blood pressure. Some people tend to mix and get mixed up. Blood pressure, we all have a blood pressure, which is the force that the blood exerts on our arteries.
The average, we understand, for the adult
should be less than 140/90.
Okay.
Yeah, so our blood pressure should be less than that. Once it's persistently above 140/90, we call that hypertension. And that is not just one sitting, because if I do your blood pressure after you've run a marathon, for instance, it's going to be very high. You have to check it properly, allow the person to rest, and it has to be at several visits. It's not just one-off thing. Your BP is high and you're hypertensive. So it's persistent elevation of blood pressure.
So it's not just 120/80.
So no, ideal is 120/80, but from above 140/90, we'll call that elevated blood pressure. That's hypertension.
Okay.
So we have the ideal, but then we have what is abnormal. So once it's persistently above 140/90, they will call that hypertension. And it has to be persistent. That's very important. It's not a one-off thing. It's not just one episode, or maybe I was sick in the hospital, I was attacked by armed robbers, and my BP shot up, and just a one-off thing. It has to be persistent. We have to allow that event. We have to check it several times, and it has to be persistently elevated. That's what we call hypertension. So but the most, as I said, we could break it into two broad classes, and the one that most people have, we call it essential hypertension, which is or primary hypertension. That is, it's hypertension that isn't, because you can have hypertension because your kidney is failing, for instance, or you have some particular problems with your hormonal system, or you have, so that is hypertension that is due to a particular organ of your body that is malfunctioning. So we call that secondary hypertension. But the primary hypertension, that is the one that otherwise you could be healthy, you have no problems. Okay, I'm fine, I'm even a marathon runner, I'm whatever, but my blood pressure is high. That's all you have. So that is the commonest, type of hypertension. But then the danger with this is that if that is not controlled, then it can eventually lead to the kidney failure and lead to the stroke, complications. But primary hypertension is hypertension that is usually not attributable to a particular, organ dysfunction in your body. So and usually we still, you cannot pin it to a particular identifiable cause, but that's what we call about risk factors. And that type of hypertension is multifactorial. It's an interplay of genes, lifestyle, environment, and then we cannot pin it on just, it's because you have a kidney problem or because you are this or that. So that's what we call primary essential hypertension. And then that's which, as I said, is multifactorial, which is why it has to have a multi-pronged approach to control and to potentially delay or prevent or to manage.
How often should one check one's blood pressure?
So it depends on your risk profile and your age. So what we advocate is generally everybody, irrespective of we advise people to have checks, periodic medical checkup, and probably periodic and which is annual, at least at the minimum, and at once a year. It is very healthy to have.
From what age?
I would say from I don't think there is any really, I would say, clear-cut minimum, but obviously from adulthood, and the older you get, it becomes much more, advisable to have, and the more detailed. The older you get, that check should be, more detailed. But what I'm saying, I don't want to put any minimum because, hypertension can occur at any time, so it's better. So which is why, and opportunistic. So even if it's just, blood pressure checked once a year, even if it's if your family, somebody who goes to your hospital and you're accompanying somebody, okay, let me have my blood pressure check. That is informal. That's not a comprehensive check. I know that can be done even from when you're young, from adolescence upwards. To have your blood pressure checked at least once a year, I think it's a healthy thing, So that's that. But then obviously, if your risk is high, for instance, you have a family history, you're overweight, you have risk factors and all that, then of course it may be good to do this more regularly, maybe once or twice a year. And then if your blood pressure is borderline, that is very close to 140/90, then it's even more important. That's annual or twice yearly, or every 6 months or every 3 months. It might be advisable to check it more regularly. Then of course, if you are hypertensive, clearly, then based on with you and your doctor, it's important to check it with some certain regularity. And the regularity depends on, of course, how high it is. If it's under control, your drugs are okay, you could be fine every 1 month, 2 months, 3 months with your doctor. Or if you have a machine at home, you could check it more frequently. Sometimes we tell them daily if it's very high and we're trying to control it. Sometimes, okay, it's okay now, it can be weekly, it can be. So it's something that you actually agree with your doctor. It's also not good to get to over-checking. It can be a problem. I don't advise people checking more than once a day, for instance, checking it morning, afternoon, night, because people can have call it like a kind of complex blood pressure. Oh, my blood pressure is high, and then even that anxiety, we're not going to allow it to come down. So many times I tell people, if it's okay, no problem. I agree with your doctor, and so that you don't have that. You develop your whole life is built around your blood pressure, and so that's also something we should avoid. That's why I'm just giving guidelines, and it should be tailored based on.
Can give you high blood pressure.
yes.
High blood pressure. Checking high blood pressure can give you high blood pressure.
Yeah. And some people get anxious once the BP is being checked. They even have that anxiety.
Dr. Kushimo, how does one know that he or she, maybe I should ask it this way. What are the signs that someone should look out for to say, okay, think I need to check myself for hypertension or for high blood pressure? Are there signs?
Okay, so the truth of the matter is, for the vast majority of people, hypertension is silent. It does not have symptoms. And that's why we call it a silent killer, which is why your question is very apt. That is how often people, so we encourage people to check their blood pressure. Screening is very, very important. It cannot be overemphasized. People need to check, because most of the time it doesn't have signs. Usually, by the time you start having really clear signs that you can attribute directly to the blood pressure tends to be very high. You could now start reaching things like 190, 200, 220, you know, and that's when, and then you can start having symptoms like headache, blood vision. But you can have this 220 and not have symptoms, mind you. There are people who have 220 and are walking up and down, so which is why, you know, screening is very important. But then, if it gets really alarmingly high, you can have dizziness, blurring of vision, headache. You can develop seizures even, and then also sometimes you can also develop complications of it. You can diagnose of hypertension when the complications start. For instance, you know, heart disease, your heart begins to thicken, enlarge, your kidneys begin to fail, you may develop a stroke. That's when you have a stroke that your hypertension is detected. So that sometimes do occur in someone that has never been checking, you know. So presentation of hypertension can come in various ways. Most people are detected incidentally when they go for checkups or for malaria or for something else, and they check their blood pressure and it's high. A lot of people are diagnosed on screening and incidental findings. Some come as emergencies when the BP is very high and they come with, you know, sick with those symptoms. But it's very important to emphasize. That's why we call it the silent killer. Most of the time, it does not give signs or symptoms, which is why people need to check their blood pressure.
So perhaps the statement you are making now is, if you are 18 and above, go check your blood pressure.
Yes.
If you have never checked.
Yes.
Go and check your. If you are 18 and above, go and check your blood pressure.
Yes, and even for those who are younger, what I also advise people is, each hospital visit, each time you go to hospital, or if you're accompanying somebody, it's okay. It's all form a habit. Check your blood pressure. It doesn't cause any harm. So even for those who are even younger, anytime you have an opportunity to check your blood pressure, it's good. But I think obviously as one gets older, it's very important to check it.
Now, there are those who have said that the vulnerability is increased when people worry. Some say that blood pressure is sometimes occasioned by anxiety, by things that suddenly happen to you and then you worry. In fact, you hear people say, you have hypertension because you worry.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So it's well, yes and no. Why I would say yes and no is, let me start with the no, because it's a big misconception. People, you don't, as I said, you cannot. Hypertension is persistently elevated blood pressure. So it's not, and obviously worrying, or somebody becomes bereaved, for instance, or have, you know, a very acute agitation, or if armed robbers come into your house, of course your blood pressure is going to go up. That is natural. Once you're under intense stress, everybody's blood pressure goes up. But then that doesn't mean you're hypertensive. It has to be persistent. Once that stressor has gone, does it go down? Does it go? So it becomes hypertension when it is persistently elevated. And of course, some people can have chronic stress. You can just live in this country, because people say it's a risk factor for chronic stress. But then, obviously, even if that stress, that's why stress can contribute to your blood pressure. It's just true. If stress is persistent, it's part of your daily routine, and you also have the genetic predisposition, for instance, that's why it's an interplay of many factors. So stress on top of your genes, on top of your lifestyle and all that, can contribute to elevated blood pressure. But it's not the primary cause of hypertension.
You talked about environment. How about the work environment? There are those who say, I have a target of 40 billion naira or something to meet, and I'm anxious about whether or not I'm going to meet it. So
let me give you an anecdote. I'll answer this with an anecdote. I had a young patient, 25, 30, probably with a rich family history of hypertension. I said, okay, fine, typical family history, young patient and all that. I was a banker who had targets. He moved to Canada, and his blood pressure came down without use of medications. While he moved, he changed the environment. So of course, this doesn't mean this will happen to everybody. But so one thing you could explain is that it's an interplay of many factors. Obviously, this person probably has that predisposition, you know, and perhaps because of his environment, he's under work, under stress. So that predisposition, he already has the genes and all that. On top of that stressful environment, yes, perhaps it did contribute, and he went to an environment that was less stressful and all that. So what I advise, okay, fine, it's not controlled with that drug, but continue lifestyle, because this thing can still, you know, come back again and all that. So it's an interplay of several factors, but definitely it does contribute.
Okay.
What is the relationship between salt and hypertension?
Okay, so salt content, sodium, which is the active component in salt, raises blood pressure. And then when we don't handle, the body does not handle salt properly, does not excrete it as it should, it contributes to elevation in blood pressure. So yes, there is a relationship between salt intake and blood pressure. And one of the most important dietary modifications that we advise is actually to limit your salt intake. Usually we advise about 5 grams a day, which is practical terms, one level teaspoon. All your salt should amount to 1 level teaspoon of salt a day.
It's not easy. Don't eat salt at all. That's what it sounds like.
so that is what would effectively, you could have a meaningful impact on, because once you start having excessive salt consumption, yes, it does contribute to your blood pressure going up. So if you're hypertensive, it may make your drugs not to work as they should, or if you're if you have the predisposition to hypertension, you're pre-hypertensive, it can tip you to becoming hypertensive.
Doctor,
so salt intake is a strategy that can...
People already use, we're already used to sweet something.
Yeah.
It has to have taste.
Yeah.
So when you say level for the whole day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you are essentially saying, so are there alternatives to salt that people can use that will give taste to the food in Africa?
Well, okay, so now this is this is the, of course, research-guided recommendation that, and of course, on practical terms, we know it is very difficult. It's not easy for people to regard. This is what we call a low-salt diet, which we oftentimes really insist. Especially, we tend to push it more for people, of course, who have the risk factors, who are already pre-hypertensive, who are hypertensive, who are on medications and all that. But for the general population, it might not be an easy thing for everybody to add this, but at least you can minimize it. At least you don't, because people have this habit of adding salt to food, for instance, which is not so healthy. You could add some moderate amounts of salt while cooking, but you don't have to add on top. So you have to, it's about really limiting, reducing, and trying to control. And also keeping in mind that you have salt in all types of food, different, fast food, processed food, and adding. So it's about people having that consciousness, because a lot of times people are taking way beyond this. And so we can start reducing it. It may take a time. It may not be easy for everybody to just get to that low salt, but at least let us start changing our habits. It's a lifestyle thing. It's a habit that one needs to.
Speaking about what people eat, what are the other things that anyone who has vulnerability or is already in that state of hypertension, what are the things they should avoid?
Okay. They should avoid taking. Yeah. Okay. Well, before we forget, we should mention fruits and vegetables, very important. That is what people should take more. We encourage that because that also helps to reduce blood pressure because of the potassium content. But people should, we advise people to also avoid fat.
Does that include eggs?
Well, eggs, moderate amounts of egg has protein and cholesterol, but then the main emphasis when I say fat is fatty meat. When you see meat, that's better lean meat and even better poultry. Poultry has less fat than cow or goat meat. And if you're taking meat, try and strip off the fat content and as lean as possible. And then oils. That
when you say fat content, you are talking about the skin.
So if you're taking poultry, for instance, removing the skin, if you're taking, beef, if you see fat there, you should try to discourage food eating.
The skin is where the pleasure is at.
Yes, well, that's where the fat is. so meat should be as lean as possible, and then prefer to poultry has less unhealthy fat, and vegetable oils, olive oil, soy, sunflower, soybean. So these are things, and to also alcohol, moderate consumption. If you can stop, better to stop, and then at least at a moderate level, and preferably stopping if one can.
There are gradations to alcohol. There is beer, about 13-15%. I don't drink, so don't look at me like that. And then there is, the strong drinks and all of those things. When you say moderate, which of these are you talking about?
So the issue is that moderate alcohol intake will roughly be, for instance, not more than 1 glass of wine a day, or or 1 bottle of beer in a day. So that's the 5%, 30, which has 30 grams. 1 bottle of beer has 30 grams. So not taking more than 30 grams in a day.
A day?
So that's...
So I can take a bottle a day for a week.
So the point, but however, the WHO... But I need to be careful here because the WHO does not recommend any level. So that's the latest guidelines because they feel there's
no alcohol at all.
So they feel the lower the better. So they reduce as much as possible. And they don't want to give because they don't want to limit themselves to telling you, okay, so that people don't start aiming and then eventually overshooting it. But I'm telling you because practically speaking, obviously, it's still, we don't, if you know, alcohol is something that is very deeply ingrained in many cultures and all that. So excessive alcohol, I'm telling you what is excess. Okay. Which is taking more than that, you're already at risk. At
Somebody wants to know if...
But then if you don't need to do food, if you're not taking alcohol, please, you don't have to start.
Okay. Someone is asking if mama is not included in the diet, especially now that the federal government is saying we're looking in that way. Don't look at me that way. Someone is asking.
So Okpoma also has fat. So
Okpoma also has fat.
Yes. So that is.
But they say it has no food nutrient at all.
Yeah, but there is fat.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
There are those who also talk about staying too long in an air-conditioned space, air-conditioned room. They go walk to an air-conditioned car and straight up to an air-conditioned elevator into an air-conditioned office. Does that have any effect?
Well, I won't lay emphasis on the air conditioning. All I will lay emphasis is the sedentariness. Is that person always sitting down, staying in one place? Because working in I won't put too much on the air because if not air conditioned, people need to so they can concentrate and work better for their comfort. I will lay more emphasis on are they active? Do they take breaks when they are working? Do they spend the whole day in an air-conditioned space? So it's that sedentariness that increases your risk of that is not
on that,
not the AC itself.
Yeah, for executives, how much activity would you recommend for them? They have to sit in board meetings, for instance, on Monday, 2 days, less than 2 days from now. Yeah. They're going to be in an office, have a board meeting in all of the morning. When you talk about being active, what will be your recommendation to them watching you right now?
So we tend to encourage people at a minimum, if they can, at least do some, you could say 30 minutes of physical exercise, maybe up to at least 5 times a week, or more if they can, which is about roughly 150 minutes of, exercise in a week. And then, so of course, one can break it down based on your schedule and your convenience. More time on Sundays, you can do 1 hour, 1 day, alternate day, but at least roughly to have about 30 minutes and 5 times a week, which is what the general recommendation. But one should try and be inventive, try and incorporate it into your day. So instead of, if you take public transport, rather than taking Okada to your house, you can stop the bus stop before and trek the last mile. And then have different ways of if you're in your office to take breaks, your tea break, rather than spending the tea break just sitting down, move around the office, go to the cafeteria, climb the steps, move around. So it's about really being inventive, not, and then really incorporating it into your day so that it becomes a lifestyle, it becomes a habit, something that is, and of course one can do more. I'm telling you, it was the minimum recommended. And if you can do more than that, even better.
Okay. So is there anything special for men or for women or for children in dealing with this issue of hypertension?
Well, I think in general, the recommendations tend to be similar. I don't think we really discriminate by sex per se. But one thing I will talk about with children is that I think we need to start educating them on healthy lifestyle when they are young. Because taking vegetables, for instance, you need to start training them. It's not when they become adults with hypertension, you start forcing them to start eating vegetables. Let them start learning this healthy lifestyle, fruits, vegetables, let them start incorporating their diet so that if they grow up with it, then it becomes something that they can live throughout. So a lot of times we don't lay emphasis on children. We think, oh, they're okay, they don't have blood pressure, they don't have okay, and they're eating fast food the whole day. Then when they are 30s, 40s, you start teaching them to live healthy lifestyle. So I think we need to start early. That's one thing I would say with children. Let's start teaching them these things. In fact, we used to do it sometimes. One of our outreaches, we actually went to secondary schools and started telling them these things I'm telling you. We started telling them we need to start early. Let us start to educate them. So, because it's a lifestyle, it's a habit. And if they form that habit early, it's easier to maintain it through life. Rather than when they are 50s, 60s, we start telling them for the first time how to eat vegetables and exercise and all that. Let them start that lifestyle and preventing the onset of these things at an early age.
Doctor, is that why the introduction says that hypertension is preventable? So if you start that healthy lifestyle from when you're young...
Yeah, so it is potentially, but obviously not in everybody. Preventable potentially in some people. But as I said, if you have a very strong genetic component, you may not be able to prevent it, but at least you may even delay the onset, or you may actually help the controls to be better. So it is not 100% preventable, but in some people, yes, it could be potentially preventable.
I'm going to put you at risk right now. Please don't have hypertension as a result. You said someone, what's the word we use, jackpot, and the person's BP came down, and he treated it with just the environment. Is there a role for government? Because the figures are scary for Nigeria, even for Africa. Is there a role for government in terms of making life maybe easier for people and as a result help them to cut down on these risks?
Yes, government has a big role to play. At the population level, government has a big role to play. And then one thing they can do, first of all, is improving health access. People should have access to healthcare so that they can go to hospital, they can be screened, they can be detected early. Early detection of these things are very important. Access to healthcare, then education. Surveys incorporated it into our school curriculum, for instance. Healthy lifestyle is something that we need to start very early, and then wide-scale education of the populace, and even education, even just formal education also, because a formal educated person is more easily for them to understand many of these concepts and also to adopt them easily. So I would say education, government policy, also this lifestyle, if people can also influence industry regulation so that all this processed food, they can reduce the trans fat and the salt content of many of these processed foods, that will help the population to even reduce the salt, because a lot of salt intake we take is actually unconscious. We're not even knowing why, and we're just taking salt that's already added for us, and we're not even thinking about it. So government has a role there to also in introducing policies to reduce the salt content of our food.
Is there a role for noise? Does too much noise contribute to high blood pressure? I'm sorry. I
wouldn't. Well, maybe potentially. I mean, it won't be the major factor, because maybe noise could make you not sleep at night, for instance. Someone is making noise and you're not sleeping for months. Obviously, it could, but it's not like it's not directly.
So inadequate sleep is also a contributor.
Oh, yes. Oh.
You don't sleep enough?
Yes.
You have a problem?
Yes, it can. It can. Inadequate sleep, yes, it increases your stress levels. And those who have obstructive sleep apnea, which is a medical condition, they don't sleep well, and their blood pressures tend to be more elevated, yes.
Now you know. Dr. Wale Kushimo, a cardiologist, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I'm almost certain that your phones are going to be buzzing all day today. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, Sunrise continues with the next and last item on the program, which we call the home stretch.